As you know, this meeting is called Flying Seminar, and when we say Flying Seminar, we mean a set of conversations open to people from here and people who are downtown and who are engaged in the movement, and we think about it that we are carving a space and a little bit of time in which things could be talked about, discussed, narrated. So it's a place for telling stories and asking questions, and hoping that that would help somewhat to move ahead with our understanding of the movement and with the movement understanding of itself. It is our incredible honor and good luck that we have with us today Adam Michnik. He actually came for something that is going to happen here on Monday. He has a new book coming up called In Search of Lost Meaning. But he agreed to come. He himself is fascinated with what's going on, and let me just tell you a few words about him. And I'm addressing them to those who don't know much about Adam. When he was your age, he was already in prison.
Your age.
Your age. I'm just not looking at well, it's clearly not my age. Well, just let me say that between 65 and 86, he spent over 6 years in prison. Multiple arrests, house searches, interrogations. He suffered various physical violence by police. From 1968, he became very, very well known and called officially an inspirator of the movement, which is known as March 1968 in Poland. But really an inspirator of almost all important expressions of dissent or of opposition against protest against the totalitarian regime in Poland. He was a student, and then he was kicked out of the university, so he became a worker. So he went to prison, and once he was released in prison, it was a good luck, actually, I think, to spend 1 year as a worker at the Rosa Luxemburg work factory, where he was sent to be re-socialized, so really. He edited clandestine journals. He published samizdads. He was a lecturer at Flying University. Now, this seminar is taking a name, is inspired by Flying University, a set of lectures, seminars in private apartments, conducting private apartments in various cities in Poland, the cities which had academic, which had universities, university cities. By now, I lost count, but I don't know whether it's more than 15 books that he's written, 6 of them in prison. So prison is good, if you think about it, and it was good clinical meeting. So you are meeting somebody here who is a partly kind of legendary hero for very many people, a person without any flaws, for many people, the key enemy, and somebody who is a big problem in the modern history of Finland. I trying to think about how to introduce him, and this is almost over, but let me just say, I looked into an article written many, many years ago for Adam's birthday, I think it was 40th birthday, by a brilliant Polish poet who until quite recently was teaching at Harvard University, by Stanisław Barańczak. And Barańczak wrote about those disquieting questions that Adam asked his friends or proposed in front of his friends, and he was talking about 60s or in early 70s. Why are you complaining about censorship, since you could easily use your own ingenuity, a bit of ingenuity, and a few typewriters, and create an independent form to state entire circulation of publications, independent from the state which wants to control it? Why are you lamenting over the miserable state of higher education, instead of inviting students for private lectures in your own apartments? Why are you crying over the gap dividing workers from intellectuals? while doing nothing, to communicate with the workers. Um, so that kind of gives you a sense why we have Michnik here, and we think that it would be interesting to hear from him. And then what we also think would be very, very good is to actually ask you about the issues that are current issues downtown. We went yesterday to the end tail of the General Assembly, and we saw those emotions and the tensions. And this is obviously a very critical moment in the development of the movement. So I hope that we will be having here a kind of informed conversation on both sides, from the side of the past and from the side of the present. So when I'm looking back, it almost seems as though, and I don't have to introduce myself, you know that I'm also from there, um, um, from Poland. It almost seems as though in communist Poland, the situation was somewhat simpler, crisper, clearer. Yet in both cases, it seems as though there were some, I think that there are some similarities or affinities between those cases. I don't want to stretch them too much, because one should not stretch them too much. But I like to talk about those affinities. What comes to mind? What are those? Could you talk a bit about a situation, for example? Could you talk, for example, about situation in which the politicians do not listen to the people? Yeah. Could you comment on that moment? Do you have any reflection? I think that this is where we are also in this country.
Przede wszystkim chcę prosić Państwa, żebyście nie wierzyli w te strzeliste komplementy Elżbiety pod moim adresem.
First of all, I wanted to ask you not to believe all these overstated compliments that Elżbieta just addressed to me.
Po drugie chcę powiedzieć, że jestem bardzo przejęty tym, że tutaj jestem w tym momencie w Nowym Jorku i mogę z Wami rozmawiać.
Secondly, I wanted to say I'm very moved that I can be here at this moment in New York and that I can speak with you.
Bo to jest coś takiego, jakby widzieć, jak historia wchodzi w nowy zakręt.
Because being here is like seeing history take a new turn.
Tak to parę razy w życiu obserwowałem i to jest zawsze bardzo fascynujące doświadczenie.
I've had the occasion to see this a few times in my life, and it's always a fascinating experience.
Na pytanie Elżbiety bym odpowiedział tak.
Regarding Elżbieta's question, I would answer in the following way.
Kiedy politycy nie słuchają tego, co mówią ludzie, stale są zaskakiwani ludzkimi reakcjami.
When politicians don't listen to what the people are saying, they're constantly being surprised by the people's reactions.
Ja jestem z pokolenia, które się określa mianem pokolenie 68.
I belong to the generation which is described as the generation of 68.
Otóż cały 68 rok był kompletnym zaskoczeniem dla klasy politycznej na wschodzie czy na zachodzie. Nikt nie spodziewał się polskiej wiosny i całej fali, która z nią przyszła. Nikt nie spodziewał się demonstracji studenckich w Warszawie, innych polskich miastach czy w Belgradzie.
So all of 1968 was a surprise for the ruling class, both in the East and in the West, and no one expected the Prague Spring and the wave of protest that came in Warsaw and other cities throughout Europe.
Ale także dla francuskiej klasy politycznej kompletnym zaskoczeniem było to, co stało się we Francji, a na nazwę paryskiego maju.
And likewise for the French political class, the ruling class, what happened in France and Paris, the Paris May was a complete surprise.
Kiedy politycy nie słuchają ludzi, to trochę inaczej wygląda w państwie demokratycznym, a inaczej w państwie dyktatury.
When politicians don't listen to the people, it looks different in a democratic country and then in a dictatorship.
I myśmy w Polsce mieli wiarę, że jeżeli przyjdzie demokracja, to politycy będą musieli słuchać ludzi. To okazało się nieprawdą.
In Poland, we had faith that once democracy comes, the politicians will have to listen to the people, but this turned out not to be the case.
I we wszystkich krajach postkomunistycznych obserwujemy dzisiaj ten proces wyobcowywania się klasy politycznej.
And today, in all the post-communist countries, we are witnessing the process of alienation of the ruling class.
I to albo prowadzi wprost do dyktatury, jak w Białorusi, czy w azjatyckich republikach, albo do takiej pełzającej dyktatury, jak w Ukrainie, w Rosji, czy na Węgrzech.
So this leads either to direct dictatorship, such as in Belarus, or in the Central Asian republics, or to the so-called crawling dictatorship, which we see in the Ukraine, in Russia, or in Hungary.
To znaczy, jest tutaj taka korelacja. Jeżeli społeczeństwa nie są aktywne, to klasa polityczna ich uważa, że w porządku, że nie ma powodu słuchać.
So there's a correlation. If the societies are not active, the political class decides that everything is fine and that there's no reason for them to be listening.
To, co się dziś dzieje na całym świecie, mnie przypomina trochę 68 rok.
What is happening today throughout the world reminds me somewhat of 1968.
Oczywiście tak jak wtedy, tak i dziś są różne lokalne uwarunkowania.
Just as then, also today, there are specific local conditions.
Ale co najważniejsze to jest to, że młodzi ludzie powiedzieli, że nie podoba im się ten świat, w którym żyją.
What is most important is that young people have said that they do not like the world in which they live.
I dla mnie mniej ważne jest to, czy oni w konkretnych swoich krytykach mają rację. Ważniejsze jest to, że oni się zebrali, skupili i coś powiedzieli wspólnie.
For me, it's less important whether their specific critiques are correct. What's more important is that they came together and that they said something collectively.
W 1968 roku młodzi ludzie wierzyli, że zmienią świat i zbudują prawdziwy socjalizm czy komunizm.
In 1968, young people believed that they would change the world and they would build true socialism or communism.
Tam były czerwone sztandary, Mao Tse-tung, Trocki, Guevara, Marcuse.
So there were the red flags, Mao Tse-tung, Trotsky, Guevara, Marcuse.
Oni nie zmienili świata, ale zmienili język rozmowy o świecie.
They did not change the world, but they changed the language in which to speak about the world.
To była rewolucja, która nie sięgnęła po władzę, ale sięgnęła po władzę nad sposobem komunikowania się ludzi, nad systemem wartości.
It was a revolution which did not reach for power, but it reached for power over the way of speaking and of communicating and the power over the system of values.
Ja pamiętam 80 rok w moim kraju i pierwszy strajk tramwajarzy w Warszawie.
I remember in 1980 in my country in the first strike of the tram workers.
To byli przypadkowi ludzie. Mieli taki meeting w środku miasta.
It was a mix of incidental people. They had a meeting, a rally in the middle of the city.
I mówili rzeczy niespójne ze sobą, sprzeczne często.
And what they said was incoherent. Some of the things were even contradictory.
Ja do dziś nie wiem, ile tam było autentycznych strajkujących, a ilu prowokatorów policyjnych.
And to this day, I don't know how many of them were authentically involved in the strike and how many of them were provocateurs sent by the police.
W pewnym momencie tam wystąpił taki chłopak, ja wiem, 25 lat, 30 może, i mówił: ja będę waszym reprezentantem. Jutro pójdę w waszym imieniu negocjować do komitetu centralnego.
At a certain point, a young man stood up. He was 25, maybe 30, and he said, "I'm going to be your representative. Tomorrow I'm going to speak in your name with the Central Committee."
Okay, I just thought that it's important to realize that in 1980 is a pivotal year in Poland, and it's the year where solidarity emerged. I don't know if this happened before or after.
Just before.
Just before
July
solidarity.
in Warsaw.
So this is the moment where an unprecedented labor movement, citizens movement, challenges communist authority in a way that's visible in to the whole society.
In a way, ahead of the...
I actually forgot, but just ahead of a major national strike. So he's describing a very, very critical turning point in the history of the communist regimes.
Jeff zna lepiej historię Polski niż ja.
Jeff knows Polish history better than I do.
To był taki moment, kiedy to jeszcze nie był ruch, to był tłum.
And this is a moment when this was not yet a movement, it was a crowd.
Ale to jednocześnie był sygnał, że ta woda podskórna dochodzi do stanu wrzenia.
But at the same time, it was a signal that things are about to boil over.
No i tak jak mówił Jeff, miesiąc później już był wielki strajk w Gdańsku, który się potem rozlał na całą Polskę.
And just as Jeff said, a month later there was the great strike in Gdańsk, and then it spilled over to all of Poland.
I elity polityczne musiały zacząć słuchać, bo nie miały innego wyjścia.
And at that point, the political elites had to start to listen because they had no other choice.
Co się wydarzyło z tym człowiekiem, który powiedział, że będzie reprezentantem?
Co się wydarzyło z tym człowiekiem?
And what happened to the person who said, I will represent you?
Nic się nie wydarzyło i nigdy później nie widziałem go na oczy. Natomiast pamiętam, że jak on to powiedział, to ja wstałem i powiedziałem: nie, ty nas nie będziesz reprezentował, bo ciebie nikt nie wybrał.
Okay.
So he said, nothing happened, I never saw him again. However, when he stood up, Adam stood up and said, no, you will not represent us because no one has elected you.
Ani on, ani ja nie dostaliśmy brawa.
So you have to.
There was no ovations for either him or for me.
So translate the hand movement.
Adam saw it yesterday because we went yesterday to the assembly. So he actually saw that, so they liked it. It was very good. Tak.
I to jest, ja myślę, cecha współczesnej demokracji, że klasa polityczna zamyka się w sobie.
And I think this is a characteristic of contemporary democracy, that the political class is closing in within itself.
I bardzo mnie pasjonuje, jak to wygląda w Polsce oczywiście.
I'm passionately interested in how that plays out in Poland.
W każdym razie mój syn poszedł na ten marsz oburzonych.
My son went to join the March of the Indignant.
In support of Occupy Wall Street, yeah? There was a march in Warsaw which was called the March of the Indignant.
Więc chwała Bogu, że nie ma amerykańskiej wizy, bo tu przyjechał i z nami okupował Wall Street.
Thank God he doesn't have an American visa, because he would come and join me here to occupy Wall Street.
Poles don't have visas, you know, to America. Yeah, you have to know that. We have to change that. So we have more people downtown. Yeah. The Czechs have it. We don't. Yeah. No. All right. I think
To by była ta taka moja zasadnicza odpowiedź, ale mnie się wydaje, że to, co wczoraj mogłem zerknąć tylko na ten plac okupowany, to mi przypominało takie klimaty z mojej wczesnej młodości, kiedy spotykaliście się ludzie, którzy się wcześniej nie znali i nagle zobaczyli, że coś ich łączy.
So that fundamentally that would be my answer, but I have to say that yesterday what I was able to glimpse in the park reminded me of the time of my youth, of this sort of atmosphere where people who didn't know each other came together and they realized that something connects them.
I nas wtedy pytano, czego wy chcecie?
And they would ask us, what do you want?
Myśmy jeszcze nie umieli powiedzieć dokładnie, czego my chcemy, ale umieliśmy powiedzieć, czego nie chcemy.
We were not yet able to say what we want, but we could say what we don't want.
All right.
Tremendously interesting.
Yeah, so let me just ask Adam two more questions that I think can kind of show, you know, the kind of crossing paths of those, you know, then and now, and then we will open it to you. And I particularly want to open it to people from Occupy Wall Street. One thing that this guy who sits here to my right did, and which is considered important and a kind of a groundbreaking, was that. You know, for a long time, the link between politics and morality had been broken. You know, those two were divorced in official talk. Or let's say the moral dimension of the politics have been questioned. He kind of renegotiated this divorce. And so I want to ask him, how is it that moral example can gain political meaning? For me, the movement has a huge moral dimension about everything else. So I'm trying to, and it's not an easy question, but how is it that when people act in public, with this deep moral engagement, how is it that that is translated into political action, or it gains political meaning? Can you comment on that?
To pytanie odwrócił. A w jaki sposób przykłady niemoralnego zachowania mają polityczne znaczenie?
So I would reverse the question. I would say, how is it that examples of immoral behaviors gain political meaning?
Otóż w Polsce to było takie permanentne kłamstwo polityczne.
In Poland, we were living with a permanent political lie.
O historii, o rzeczywistości, o kulturze, o wszystkim.
Regarding history, regarding reality, culture, everything.
Natomiast jeżeli ja dobrze rozumiem ten wstrząs, to jest wstrząs tego, co się dzieje w tak zwanej gospodarce rynkowej z wielkimi rekinami tej gospodarki, z bankierami, z wielkimi kapitalistami.
So if I understand what is shocking here correctly, the crux of the matter is what goes on with the big sharks of the business world, the bankers, the financiers.
Otóż to, co się dowiadujemy o tym świecie, to dowiadujemy się, że tam rządzą prawa totalnie amoralne.
So the things that we find out about that world are that it's ruled by entirely amoral or immoral laws.
I to wzbudza moralny sprzeciw.
And this awakens a moral opposition.
Y, Rzeczywiście jest tak jak mówi Elżbieta, że moralność i polityka były rozłączone.
And it is just as Elżbieta says that morality and politics were separated.
Ale jeżeli popatrzymy na największe polityczne autorytety naszego czasu, to są autorytety moralne.
But if we look towards the greatest political authorities of our time, they are also moral authorities.
Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Mandela, Havel, no powiedzmy to
Michnik.
Right.
Sacharow. To są wszystko.
So, well, the names of, keep going. All of them are.
To są autorytety moralne. W którym momencie one się stają normotwórcze?
So all of these are moral authorities, and the question is, at what point do they become a source of norms?
Że w pewnym momencie, jak w tej bajce Andersena, król jest nagi.
At a certain point, just like in Andersen's fairy tale, someone says the king is naked.
I mnie się wydaje, że to, co ja usłyszałem, a może to, co chciałem usłyszeć w tym proteście obecnym, to jest właśnie to, król jest nagi.
And it seems to me that what I heard, or perhaps what I wanted to hear in the ongoing protest, is exactly this: the king is naked.
Że nie może tak być, żeby wszystkie koszta kryzysu wywołanego przez system bankowy ponosili inni, a ci prezesi banków sobie przyznawali wielomilionowe premie. To jest niemoralne.
That it can't be the case that the cost of the crisis, which was caused by the banking system, is borne by other people, by others, whereas the bankers themselves are giving themselves multi-million bonuses.
Oczywiście można na to odpowiedzieć, że ta retoryka jest używaniem argumentu moralnego do walki politycznej.
So calling this immoral, if you call this immoral, one could argue that using this kind of rhetoric is resorting to moral arguments in political struggle.
Ja się z tym mogę zgodzić. Winston Churchill nie był moralistą, był brytyjskim imperialnym politykiem.
And I would even agree with this. Winston Churchill was not a moralist. He was a British imperialist politician.
Ale kiedy była wojna z Hitlerem,
But when it came to the war with Hitler,
to użył argumentu moralnego.
then he turned to a moral argument.
Powiedział, Hitler, the bad man. I więc to są takie momenty, kiedy właśnie odruch moralny nabiera politycznego znaczenia.
And these are the kinds of moments where this moral impulse gains a political meaning.
Ja pamiętam to z Polski.
I remember this from Poland.
W 1976 roku była fala strajków przeciwko podwyżce cen.
In 1976, there was a wave of strikes because of the increase in prices.
In factories, worker strikes.
Wielu strajkujących ze względu na istotę aresztowano i zrobiono im tak zwane ścieżki zdrowia, to znaczy ich prowadzono, tam stał szereg policjantów, oni szli w środku i ich lano papałami.
So many of the striking workers were arrested, and then they were put through something that was called the health course, where they were walking. There were two lines of policemen, and these men were walking in between them, and they were being beaten.
With batons and...
I ja pamiętam swoją reakcję na to.
And I remember my reaction to this.
to nie była reakcja polityczna, to była reakcja czysto moralna.
And it was not a political reaction, it was a purely moral one.
Z tym nie można się zgodzić.
One can't agree to
Że
this.
w moim kraju coś takiego robią z ludźmi, a my się godzimy na to, milczymy.
One can't agree that something like this could be going on in our country, that they could be doing this to people, and we would acquiesce to this and be silent.
W pewnym momencie, żeby powiedzieć nie.
At a certain point, you have to say no.
I zdolność do powiedzenia nie jest zdolnością rewolucyjną.
And the ability to say no is a revolutionary ability.
Adesio, you are famously quoted as somebody who said that one has to behave as though, despite of living in clearly unusual circumstances in the dictatorship, one has to agree, one has to pretend that one lives in a normal country. One has to pretend that flying universities are normal, even though we live in the country which completely controls the system of education, of higher education. One has to agree that the independent, clandestine workers' union, labor union are normal, even though all unions in the country are to be state controlled and state inspired, state established. So your idea was.
I just wanted you to clarify exactly what the Flying University was.
Okay, I hope that you will tell us. Well, let me just tell you. Flying University, and Adam was one of the lecturers in Flying University, meant that when you go to the university and you were a student of history and you could not read very many things about the country's past or Europe's past or world past, or if you go to a political science class and the only thing that you could read, and I was good in reading all of that, was great classic Marx, and then another great classic Lenin, and then the versions and interpretations are both of that, and that's it. Then you wanted your professors to go and to have a seminar in which you can actually talk about any alternatives or anything else. So Flying University was really a private. It was organized by independent scholars, and there were classes in private apartments all around Warsaw, where you can go, and it was a problem because you could be beaten when you were getting out. People who gave apartments could be harassed in a major way. So that's what it was. We are not in that situation here. So despite of that, he said we have to have it because that makes us normal, right? That makes us normal. So the idea was that the state doesn't have to accept the parallel institutions, yet by those institutions being there, the state is forced, in fact, to see that this is reality, that this is not a phantom, it's a reality. And then you said that what makes this reality even more important is when it became massive. When there is not one seminar, but in every city. When there is not one union in Gdańsk, but they are all kind of mushrooming and greening all around. Because it's very important, the numbers are important, the massiveness is very important, because then one cannot disregard that thing, that movement, that reality. Could you comment on that?
Kobieta lepiej pamięta, co kiedy ja pisałem.
Zbyta remembers what I wrote and went better than I do.
Ale rzeczywiście myśmy mieli takie przekonanie, że sposób na wywieranie represji na władzę to jest permanentne organizowanie niezależnej opinii publicznej.
But in fact, we did have this conviction that a way to exert pressure against the government is to permanently organize independent public opinion.
I jest taki moment, kiedy wydaje się, że jest trudno się przebić ze swoim głosem do mainstream po prostu.
And there's a moment where it seems that it's very difficult to break through with one voice into the mainstream.
Klasa polityczna jest zamknięta, żeby się przebić do mediów nie ma pieniędzy, a media są kontrolowane przez biznes.
So the political class is closed in. One doesn't have enough money to break into the media, and the media are controlled by business.
I wtedy nie ma innej rady niż po prostu samoorganizacja społeczna.
And at that point, there is no other way except self-organizational self-government of the society.
I to jest największe wyzwanie dla ruchu, który chce zmienić swój kraj.
And this is the greatest challenge for a movement that wants to change its country.
Dlatego, że my zachowujemy się jak wolni ludzie w wolnym kraju, chociaż to jest kraj dyktatury.
Because we are behaving as free people in a free country, even though this is a country of a dictatorship.
Ale społeczeństwo żyje pod dyktaturą i zachowuje się w inny sposób.
But the society is living under dictatorship and it's behaving differently.
Teraz problem polega zawsze na tym, jak ten wirus wolności wstrzyknąć do społeczeństwa.
And the crux of the problem lies in us how to inject the virus of freedom into society.
I to się nigdy nie dokonuje z dnia na dzień.
And this never happens from one day to the next.
I ten sukces nigdy nie jest definitywny.
And the success is never definitive.
Z wolnością jest jak z tym kamieniem, który Syzyf pcha do góry.
Freedom is like the stone that Sisyphus is pushing up the mountain.
On spada ten kamień, ale trzeba go pchać.
It keeps falling down, but you must keep pushing it up.
Ja niedawno pisałem obszerny esej o najwybitniejszym chyba dysydencie naszego regionu, o Wacławie Havlu.
I recently wrote a long essay about a person who's perhaps the most eminent of the dissidents of our region, Václav Havel.
I u Havla ta figura tego Syzyfa, który pcha kamień, jest permanentnie obecna.
And for Havel, this figure of Sisyphus who is pushing the stone up the mountain is permanently present.
Dlatego, że nawet jeżeli świata nie zmienimy całkiem, to zmienimy go choć trochę.
Because even if we can't change the world entirely, we'll change it just a little bit.
Świat nigdy nie będzie doskonałym rajem, ponieważ my nie jesteśmy aniołami.
The world will never be a perfect paradise. The world will
Because we are
never
not
be
angels. Yeah.
Natomiast nie znaczy to, że światem w ogóle się zmienić nie da.
But this does not mean that one can't change the world in any measure.
Tylko zmieniać go można, tak myśmy myśleli, pod warunkiem, że będziemy mieli cierpliwość i wyobraźnię.
And we thought that we can keep working on changing the world if we have imagination and patience.
Więc ten kluczowy moment to jest jak przejść od środowiska aktywnych, zdeterminowanych dysydentów do szerokiego społeczeństwa, które po prostu jest inne.
So the key moment concerns the question of how to move from the activist group of engaged people to the wider society who is simply different.
Ja miałem ja pracowałem między innymi w podziemnym i niezależnym ruchu wydawniczym.
Among other things, I worked for the underground press.
I był wśród nas spór, jakie książki publikować.
And we had arguments about which books to publish.
But you understand, underground press in Poland went really illegal work, because it had to be done clandestinely, and the people who were caught on it went to prison for a long time. Underground.
Tak, a to było drukowane nielegalnie na powielaczach.
It was illegally printed in presses at homes.
Through mimeographing, because there were no Xeroxes.
I wielu moich kolegów uważało, że trzeba drukować bez przerwy o zbrodniach komunizmu i o tym, że komunizm to jest straszny system.
And many of my friends believed that we should be constantly printing works about the crimes of communism and that communism was a terrible system.
Ja mówię, nie piszmy w kółko, że komunizm to straszny system, bo ludzie w Polsce to wiedzą.
And I would say, let's not be writing over and over again that communism is terrible. People in Poland know that.
My musimy ludziom ofiarować coś, czego im nie daje władza komunistyczna, czy zabrania im władza komunistyczna.
We have to offer people something that the government is not only not giving to them, but is prohibiting them from
Więc
having.
drukujmy wiersze Miłosza, książki Gombrowicza, to znaczy coś, co nie ma bezpośredniego przełożenia na politykę, ale co zmienia tych ludzi.
So let's print Miłosz's poems or Gombrowich's books, something that doesn't have immediate translation into the political, but that changes people.
Myśmy w podziemiu wydrukowali skowy Ginsberga.
In the underground press, we published Ginsberg's Howl.
Wydrukowaliśmy to dlatego, że to jest składnik kultury współczesnej, który komuniści odcięli nam.
We printed it because it's an element of contemporary culture which the communists cut off from us.
Czy blaszany bębenek Gintera Grassa.
We also printed the tin drum by Ginter Grass.
W Rosji na maszynie przepisywano komu bije dzwon.
In Russia, they were using typewriters to copy for whom the bell tolls.